Hey, this is Bryan.
And Shelby.
And you're listening to the Hyperspace
PodBlast. Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh?
Oh, hey, and welcome back to Hyperspace PodBlast number 23. Should fandom influence Star Wars content?
Brilliant.
I know.
Absolutely.
I learned from the best.
5 stars. Would try to understand it.
Who is not you.
So anyway, what we're talking about today is should fandom influence Star Wars content? What we mean by that is all of these, I hope we get this and that comic, or they should do a this and that Star Wars story, those kind of things. We've even done it here on the podcast, like what would make a good Star Wars story. Should things like that influence what Lucasfilm, Disney, etc. do with the Star Wars universe, or should they just keep on keeping on and let us keep wishing and hoping this in one hand, that in the other, and see what you end up with type thing? You know what I mean. So what do you think?
Well, I think that fans should be impacting Star Wars and the Star Wars franchise to some degree, especially the Star Wars franchise, when you talk about the stuff and the things rather than the story.
Yeah, content aside, I would agree with you. The Star Wars, like, and they even do that with the toys. They have that fan poll where they let you pick what Black Series comes out. So that kind of thing makes perfect sense. I agree. But what about what kind of things they make story-wise? Like, should they start making a poll to see who should be the next comic book? Or, you know, who needs a novel? What do you want the next anthology or whatever we're calling them now film to be? Or should they leave that kind of decision to their, you know, employed professionals?
I don't know. I mean, because I think there's a big difference in deciding the what versus the how. So I think that like things wouldn't crumble and everything would be terrible if fans decided, especially on things that weren't like the larger films.
Right, yeah. I have a feeling that the films are going to be off limits, so to speak.
Right, but if you say fans decide who would be featured in the next comic miniseries, I think that would be something that would be acceptable, because you're saying you're picking a character versus what that character does, and that's what's left to the creatives. Right,
so you're saying don't let fans tell the story. Maybe let them
decide where they want to play in the sandbox.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you let the kid pick his spot in the sandbox, but you give him the toys he has to play with.
Yep.
I get
What about you, Bryan?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same. I think the creatives do take popular opinion into account, but I think that's as far as it gets. I don't think, you know, I mean, take this, what is it, the Old Republic Netflix series thing that's got quite a, I'd say, cult following, maybe a little more than that. I'm not sure what type of numbers associate with designations, but anyway, it's definitely got some momentum behind it. But even Pablo has said, you know, this makes no difference to us. Like, we appreciate your passion, etc., but that's not how we do business. So I can see that. You know, I appreciate that the passion's there too. It's just I think they're right in not taking everything fans want and making it something in Star Wars, because I think Star Wars fandom, you know, air quotes here, fandom, especially like the little niche stuff like Twitter, the social media outlets, like the Reddit groups, we tend to kind of think inside our own little world, like we are fandom. What we want is what all Star Wars fans want. There are literally millions of people that like Star Wars, and these little niche groups don't speak for those millions. So we kind of get inside our own head a little bit on as far as thinking we know what's best for Star Wars when there's really no possible way we could.
True, and it's also about accepting the truth that it doesn't matter who owns Star Wars. It's a business.
Oh yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
We're trying to make money here, and understanding that that is a component of deciding what kind of stories get told.
Yeah, and even back to the very original film, like people blasted it for being a theatrical commercial to sell toys. You know what I mean? So it's been that kind of marketing commercial juggernaut since the word go. It's not like it started out as this tiny thing and like it blossomed. And I mean, it did do that, but still, the toys were there from the get-go. They're not taking advantage of some newfound thing. You know what I mean? So I agree completely. They're running it as a business, and they're doing what's best for the overall company. They're not trying to target Star Wars fans and like make us explode with happiness or anything.
Right.
But I mean, if we're being honest, most of us do that no matter what they do. So we find a way to talk our way around stuff we don't like. That's what fandom is. You like it or else. No, I'm just kidding.
Whoa. So do you think that fandom has already had an influence?
I do. And I do in the fact that, well, first of all, that Disney purchased it. And they brought it back. You know, Star Wars is back, as they said there for a while. And, you know, EU people would roll their eyes at because Star Wars never left. But whatever. Yeah, the fact that it's such a popular thing, the fandom as a whole, the overarching fandom, influenced the fact that we have more Star Wars, more movie Star Wars. And I also think some of the post-Disney EU characters that have come back is directly influenced from their popularity carryover. Like Thrawn is the best example, I think. The reason he exists in canon... Was there a ploop at the end?
Well, the cannonball like fell in the water, so...
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. But yeah, it's... I think Thrawn is a direct result of fandom influence. And it's kind of like what you said earlier. They brought him back, but they didn't bring him back in the exact same story as the exact same character. So it was fans' choice-ish, but, you know.
But we're going to do it our way.
Right, exactly. And I think
that's a good, happy
compromise.
That's a good,
exactly. It's a happy medium. It's giving fans sort of what they want, but not kowtowing to them completely, if that makes sense, which I think it does.
I also think you have to acknowledge that fandom has had an influence on representation of diversity in Star Wars.
Yeah, I would say
the demand for that has impacted it, not in a, oh, well, we gotta do this, but just because they know that appeals to so many more fans.
Right, it broadens the horizons. It's not going to be, you know, it's off-putting for some people, but we don't want them in fandom anyway. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, dude bros. Bye. But anyway, yeah, I think that's not even fandom so much as just like the reality of the world we live in now. But, you know, if fandom was completely full of dude bros, they probably wouldn't have done that. But since it's an over, like, you know, they're probably not going to make the next Fast and the Furious movie with all women. No. Just saying.
But, I mean, really, it's because Star Wars is now being made in its own fandom's image.
Yes, exactly. It's not like the boys club anymore of the sweaty dudes in mom's basement, you know. There's sweaty women in mom's basement now. No. As they've been saying in all of these Star Wars things, Star Wars is for everyone, and everyone needs to be included in everyone. And, you know, as I think Weave and many other people have said, it's not there yet, but it's getting there. It's moving in the right direction. This isn't something you go 0 to 60 on.
Right.
But yeah, that's a good point that building itself in its own image type thing. That's more of like an indirect influence, I think. But that's a good point. I hadn't even really thought about that. You're that smart.
Oh, thanks.
So what do you think the danger would be of overindulgence of fandom influence? Like, what if, I don't know, Pablo got on Twitter and he was like, all right, everybody, throw all your ideas at me. We're going to make every one of them happen.
Well, I think it would cause us to not be able to get the major movies that we have already, like, to continue to happen because they're not going to make the profit that they should to fund those things.
Yeah, because what she's trying to say nicely is that most people's ideas would be dumb.
No, I'm just saying that not enough people would buy that content.
Right, yeah, you can't make everyone's Star Wars dream come true because it's going to be like uber niche, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and not saying that it's not a good idea even. It may be a great idea, but just it's not going to appeal to a broader audience.
Right, it doesn't work for Star Wars, basically. Like, it might be a good story to put in another universe, but it's not necessarily what Star Wars is all about.
And I think if you overindulge of what fans want, inevitably you're going to get predictable.
Yeah, that's probably true. Because especially if you go on majority rules. Like, for example, Rey would be a Skywalker.
Yep.
You know, Kylo would get redeemed.
Yep.
Snoke would be Plagueis.
Yep.
Han Solo would come back as the Force Ghost and fly the Millennium Falcon. Oh, wait,
Really?
no, that's me. Sorry. Just kidding. Han doesn't have the Force. Calm down, everybody.
Brian. You don't know what you're talking about.
I know. But yeah, I think those are the kind of things that overindulgence would like you said, it would become predictable because everyone would go for the home run type thing. And that would be no fun, you know?
Yeah.
There would be no Empire Strikes Back if the fans had their way, because the bad guys would never probably get a leg up.
I agree. What about you, Brian? What do you think is the danger of overindulgence?
Well, let me tell you about my sad Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm.
In my younger days, there was this amazing video game called Star Wars Galaxies. It was an MMO Star Wars game. It was my favorite Star Wars thing for the time period when it was out. And then SOE, Sony Online Entertainment, the company that was running the game, I know, started getting a lot of complaints from users because, you know, they couldn't be Jedi. They're like, I want to be Jedi. The game was set in the Rebellion era. There was no reason for anyone to be a Jedi. Durr. So anyway, they eventually started caving slightly. They made you have the option to be a Jedi, but it was like ridiculously hard. It was actually a really clever way to do it, but I'm not going to go into that. You can look it up. Star Wars Galaxies. Ding ding. But yeah, people complained then that it was too hard, so they made it slightly easier. It was more grindy, but not impossible. And then they're like, no, that's too hard. So then they made you have the option to just choose Jedi at the beginning. And they kept making all these changes based on the loudest people. And it turned the game to complete garbage, basically. And they eventually shut it down because people quit playing because it wasn't fun anymore. Even the people that were screaming to be Jedi were like, oh, no, it's not fun. Now everybody's a Jedi. You know, and there you go. There's your sad story of over-influence ruining Star Wars.
But Brian's not bitter or anything, guys.
I am, dude. And this is like a decade plus
He's
ago.
still
probably.
upset, I guess.
It was.
Yeah.
It meant a lot to me because it
Do you
was.
feel better now that you've gotten it off your chest?
I do, for like the 100th time that anyone even brings this up. I talk about it on Twitter all the time. I even wrote a post about it. Check out our website for it. Da-na-na. But it was like the first immersive Star Wars experience, and they ruined it for me. So yeah, that's my sad story of Star Wars.
So, where do you think the balance between giving the fans what they want and letting creatives do their job is?
See, I don't know. I think you basically hit on it before. I like the idea of actually them saying, hey, what character would you like to see get their own sort of spotlight, and not even tell you what it was going to be, but give you a list of, like, say, Afrasana, two other people. I don't know. And Padme and somebody else. I don't know. Make it up as you go along. Zuvio, yes. He needs
justice for Zuvio.
Yeah, he has a short story, which is great, but I mean, he needs more for sure. But yeah, doing something like that and not even telling you, hey, this will be a comic, this will be a novel. Just say, who do you think should get the spotlight? And the fans vote, and then that person gets something. You know, that would be really rad. I think the problem comes in when, and I know I'm going to get a little flack for this, but Rebels, for example, I know. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but there's some hardcore fan service in Rebels. And I think some of it is an homage to the Clone Wars due to the fact that they didn't get to finish it. And I kind of let them have that. But, you know, and my best example is the Funko box for Rebels had Ahsoka and Rex in it. No, Rex and Maul, yeah. Like, those aren't Rebels characters. Those are Clone Wars characters. And honestly, it all started fan service wise with Maul because he should not have been brought back from the dead. Like, that's ridiculous, especially with the spider legs. That was, I mean, that almost made it okay because it was so corny. It was like, okay, like, I don't know. It would have been even funnier though if he was just floating, like using the Force to float around with no legs, just a torso. But here I am, half Maul, still good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a middle ground of having your finger on the fandom pulse to understand what would be well received. I mean, not saying that they don't already do that, but I think ultimately what fans are really looking for is feeling like they decided.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you like to have that feeling of inclusion, I guess. And I think some kind of poll or something would do that pretty well. Because even if you don't get what you want, you had that opportunity to vote. You had a choice. Your choice didn't win. And some people will bellyache at that, but still, it's better than nothing. But yeah, I think popularity of character is probably the biggest influence right now, and the balance is overdoing that versus telling a good story. What they eventually did with Maul was, they ended up with a good story with Maul, but how they got there was kind of corny, you know what I mean? So they can bring things in as long as it makes sense. That's when you run the risk of doing things poorly just to bring a character in. That's where the balance gets upset, I think. Like right now, I think one of the biggest, there's probably two big EU characters that people want to see, Revan and some version of Mara Jade. I honestly don't see Mara Jade being brought back because I don't know how they fit the character into the current story. Based on what her character was before. Well, she was an Emperor's Hand, which was sort of like an Inquisitor. So I guess they could make her like maybe a Knight of Ren, which would be pretty cool. I think the Mara Luke ship has sailed. Unless they, unless Rey is a Skywalker and the Mara character is just someone we're going to be told about on screen, and then she'll get a novel or some such treatment for the more niche fans, because most movie-going audience doesn't even know who Mara Jade is, more or less care if she exists anymore or not. So that would be I think finding that balance between doing it because fans want it and then finding a way to fit it in the story, or finding the story that fits this character that fans want.
Right. I think that we may see some of these old EU characters reimagined in a different way. Like they are the inspiration for another completely different character. And they won't have the same name, or maybe they will have the same name, but they're not the same thing. And I think that could be very interesting to see.
Yeah, some people said they did that with the Rebels arc with the kids that are fighting the Empire. They said that the ship looks like Dash Rendar's, and even the character looks a little bit like him. But basically, aside from visual similarities, there's nothing really the same. So it might be, like you said, a very close representation, or basically just an homage. Like, here you go, guys. Like, maybe one of the Knights of Ren will be a redhead that has a purple lightsaber. She won't ever be called Mara Jade. There won't even be anything written about her. But the people that know will be able to go like, all right, I see you, Lucasfilm.
Yeah, I think that's a neat concept.
Yeah, that might be the best way to do it, honestly. Just the almost Easter eggy homage type of thing, rather than just scratching the surface relentlessly until they find a way to put it in, just to, I don't want to say appease fans, but to make them happy, because they don't need to do this stuff to appease us. Like, no matter what they do, there's going to be a contingent of people that are asking for something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, it's completely okay to not agree with every Star Wars decision.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a whole different animal, but yeah, you don't have to love it all to love it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you less of a Star Wars fan if you don't like some part of it.
And it doesn't, exactly.
It's all up for your personal consumption, bruh.
So do you think that it can go too far the other way? Like, what if a creative signs on just to quote unquote leave their mark on Star Wars?
Yeah, I think it definitely could. Like, what if someone like Tim Burton is like, yo, I want to do a Star Wars movie. And they're like, oh, cool. And he makes like a Tim Burton movie in the Star Wars universe, which, would probably be cool, but it wouldn't really be a Star Wars movie. It would be a eccentric Tim Burton movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think and that might be part of what we ran into with the Han Solo movie. I think Lord and Miller were trying to make a Lord and Miller movie in Star Wars. And Star Wars, the powers that be, Kathleen Kennedy, etc., were like, you need to make a Star Wars movie first, and you can add your little flares and touches to it. And, we don't really know the whole story, but it sounds to me like that's where they were kind of butting heads, where they were like, this is how we make movies. And we're going to do that in Star Wars. And Star Wars was like, yo, no.
Right. I mean, even just the phrase, leave their mark on Star Wars, like, oh, don't mark up Star Wars, is like the first, the thing that comes to my mind. It's like, Star Wars is not another notch in your belt.
Yeah, but it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, like just saying it. Like,
yeah, the idea that someone could,
like, God forbid Michael Bay ever makes a Star Wars movie. I would.
Don't say it.
I know. I think I would probably have a heart attack if that announcement ever came out, like, legitimately.
Right. I mean, I think it's because, people who are super stylized in a certain way, you can't ever imagine them doing something that looks or feels like Star Wars.
Right, exactly. I mean, they have their way of doing things, and they bring whatever IP they work with into that.
Do you think that stifles their creativity, though?
Yeah, I do. I think, I don't know. Does stifles Star Wars creativity or that particular creative?
That particular creative, because I say no.
I mean, it does and it doesn't. It stifles their imagination, I think, because they're kind of like, I don't want to say one-trick pony. That sounds too negative, but they're very, like, pigeonhole focused. Like, no matter what they do, it's going to come out looking like, this person's movie. And sometimes that's not bad, but sometimes genres and certain people's specific points of view just don't work. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, imagine J.K. Rowling writing a Star Wars book. That might be cool, but it'd probably be weird.
Yeah. Although I feel like you can take much more, like, you can take so many more risks with a book versus.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, like, that aside, I think that if you ask someone to do a Star Wars movie, sure, you are defining the boundaries of what they should be doing. But I think that sometimes will force you to be more creative because you have these constraints. A lot of times, when you have, like, this is how you need to do something, or it's one of those, this is the what, you get to decide the how.
Right. I agree with that to an extent, because you see that in like class with writing assignments a lot. If you tell kids just write about whatever you want, they look at you like a deer in the headlights. Like, what do you mean?
Exactly. I couldn't think of the right way to, but yes, this is what I was thinking.
Yeah. But if you tell them, write me a sonnet, they're going to be like, okay, I got rules to follow. I got guidelines. I can do this. And that's sort of what these, particular creatives were talking about. They have their own set of rules. They have their own, like, form they follow when they make movies. So they just have to fit Star Wars into their form. And that can, I think, make you be creative because you have to. And I think this is what made Star Wars so successful originally, because George had these huge fantastical ideas, but he had this tiny little budget he had to make it work in. So he had to be really creative about how he did things. And I think that's part of what makes Star Wars work. And part of why the prequels don't have the same sort of feeling, not overall like Star Wars feeling, but, they're definitely different movies because I think at that point he had basically unlimited freedom to do whatever he wanted. And he was pushing the envelope. That's kind of like the opposite form of, he was constrained before. Now he's trying to, like, do as much as he can. And it's a different kind of form. So, yeah, I think that's basically what I was thinking. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So tell us what you think.
Yeah, for sure. We want to know.
We want to know what fans think.
Oh, snap.
Maybe we'll do a poll.
Probably. We do those from time to time.
So, if you haven't checked it out yet, we have a new website.
We do.
HyperspacePodBlast.com.
Dun, dun, dun.
You're really good at those noises.
Thank you.
You can also hit us up on Twitter at hyperspace_pod. Email us hyperspacepodblast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. And the YouTubes. We're
and the YouTubes. We're
everywhere.
everywhere.
We're on the World Wide Webs, man.
So we'll talk to you later, guys.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.